Any questions?
No questions? Oh, here we go, great.
Yep.
How long did it take you to film the whole thing?
It was actually, in terms of time, it started filming on Anzac Day 2015, and the final shots were Anzac Day 2016. And over that period, actual recording about 27 hours of recording time. And then 300 hours, well, 280 odd hours of editing afterwards. And that sort of, the editing kind of went parallel while we were filming different sequences, and then I'd edit some together. So yeah, a fair amount of time to do that.
Questions? Yeah.
I was going to say, how much do you stick to your plan, and how much do you, when something crops up, that you include in the movie?
Yeah, that's a good question. The original intention of that film, the piece, was, I don't know if you remember in the film, there's one photograph you see of there's a green grass and all the stones laid out. It's a panorama photograph I took on the iPhone. That was the start of the inspiration to see it, and I wanted to know who built the original monument. And the closest way of finding that out was to follow the story of the people rebuilding the monument. So the original plan was to have much more footage of Marco, Sonny, Adrian, and Aaron, and there is a lot more footage of that, and that's how we use the hero's journey story concept. I don't know if you guys know about that.
I haven't moved.
You haven't yet? It's fantastic. It will save you, although 287 hours sounds like a lot, if you don't know where your story's going to go and it's evolving whilst you're filming it, having the structure of the hero's journey is a great way of tying that together. So, and using sticky things so you can move it around. So as we refocus the story through test screenings and different things, the first version of that was 2.5 hours long. So yeah, it got cut down to be that version, which mainly follows Hiroini's story. So we do have footage of the builders doing different things. They're artists and counsellors, and Marco, for example, he was travelling around the world doing stone conservation, and he had no idea where he was going to end up. But during that film, he met his partner in Wanganui, and he bought a house in Wanganui. So we have film of him moving into his new house, which just gives you an example of what you end up filming and what ends up going in.
Knowing that you had quite a lot to do with how narratives are put together, how do you even begin to decide how you tell a story? Any advice for students who need to think about how to do it?
Yeah, so I guess you're all interested in making films, or you've made some films and things, or even just telling stories. Having a structure is great. So having that hero's journey, you'll hear of things like the 3-act structure and all these sorts of things. As I said at the start, it's a collaboration. So if you use a structure, we all know these structures internally. So when you're from once upon a time, when you told a story as children, right through to when you hear stories now, you kind of know where they should go, and you know when there's a low point. So when we find out Hiroini dying, you know that the story should bring you back up somehow. So that's what I looked for right at the start, was identifying what could be the key moments of the film, an introduction, what they call the ordinary world, a low point, and then the restoration sort of high point. But don't be afraid to change them. The original ones got moved around and changed, but as long as you keep them in there. Some films you don't have to have them, but then you end up in a different sort of collaboration with your audience. So in fairly simple story structures, that's the way to go.
What made you decide to cut the footage of them going into this house, and then just the overall pictures? How do you decide what they're putting what?
Yeah, so again, that was as the sort of the chap who followed him around and filmed every bit of it. I love every moment I filmed, most of them, apart from the bit where I fell in the hole. Don't know if anybody knows that. The shot goes like that. So I guess it goes beyond me. When it gets to that stage, involving more and more people, so the executive producer, my wife, she became the producer, and she would watch it and many times and then suggest that I take bits out and put other bits in. So yeah, for other people. And then the test screening from the Pakai Tori, the representation of the board, and they suggest, you know, they saw the original cut and they said, you know, it needs to have more Māori voice in there, so we can put more of that in. There is a standard length for films that you can work to. So for a feature film, 90 minutes, that's 89 minutes. So that gives you another guide. You don't want to go much longer. It's got 3 endings. You know, Lord of the Rings has got 4. So we kind of, there's 3 points where you think, oh, it ended, but it doesn't. Yeah, so there's a balance. But I'm also a firm believer in behind the scenes footage as well. So that footage, we won't lose that stuff with Marco in his house and all those other things. There'll be a record, and we will give all that material to the museum, the archive in Wellington at some point. So, yeah. Have you shot stuff yourself, or?
Not really, to be honest. But I'll just curious as to how you make it.
We've got a mixed two classes here,
Oh, yeah.
12 and 13, and the year 13s are just beginning to put it together as a 4 to 8 minute documentary.
Oh yeah.
And the young class, like the year 12 class, have to start with music videos,
Okay.
narrative music videos, and
Yep.
then the following year they'll
Well, when I was about 6 or 7, I used to record. So for those doing the narrative music videos, I used to record the news off of the TV onto VHS tape, and then dub music over the 80s music. You know, when I was 6 or 7, Madonna and whatever else. But in terms of narrative, the music would sometimes talk about things like, you know, dogs or cats or whatever. And I used to love the serendipitous moment when the footage would display something that was the music lyrics were also talking about. And I used to leave it up to chance, but my parents have had to watch hours and hours and hours of news that they couldn't hear, but they just heard music, 80s music, for those wee moments where it would all align, and I was like, hey, look, see, and they're like, I'm sorry, waking up and watching it. So that's great, and cutting to music is really, really powerful as well. Using the beats to cut to music, I love doing that. And for those doing the 48-minute film,
4 minutes to
Oh,
8 minutes.
Oh, 4 to 8 minutes. Oh, right, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you one tip, right? Here's one great tip. I don't know what you're going to film on, but if you're walking down the street and you see something really interesting, see this chap back here, he's filming in the right format. He's doing that, right? If you go and film it and everybody, you see them, they're filming like this, don't do that. Just go like that. And you will save yourself, if you ever want to use that footage, it's so much better. So never do that, do that.
I did notice that someone did film it like this.
Yep. that footage of so that was way before we got involved with the story. That's when Heroine was first taken off. That was filmed by Detlef, the conservator, the guy with the Bavarian braces at the end. And he kicked himself when he saw that. Yeah, because he didn't know that orientation. He filmed it on an iPad. And yeah, he didn't know that really impacted it.
So what was it like working with the cameras you ended up working with? Like, who were they? What was it like going into those real life situations and trying to film it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when you start making films, you can have camera anxiety, because nowadays there's so many more cameras. You all know about 4K and 8K and 2K and all these sorts of things, these resolutions. So what K do you reckon that was filmed in? Any guesses? You've seen it projected here.
Have a guess, someone.
It's maybe 1080 or
1080?
144, whatever.
Yep, it was in 1080. Well done. So it's basically what you call 2K. So don't get hung up on thinking you've got to have the latest high spec camera. 2K is what most theatres in New Zealand anyway can project in. So that can't go any higher than 2K, that projector, I think. Is that right, Nick?
So
Yep. So is it 2K?
It's okay. Yes.
Yeah, and that's in the embassy in Wellington. You might find a 4K projector there. So that's the first thing in terms of your camera, and then get really comfortable with the camera. So that was shot in what's called a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, which is about the same size as that. It's just a little bit bigger, and you can put all sorts of lenses on the front of it to get different shots. So the shot where it's where he's pulling the dirt out of the thing before the concrete mix goes in, that was a hole that was about that big, and I put it on a stick, a monopod, and just put the camera down there. Didn't have a monitor or anything, so it was 7 shots. Put it down, pull it out, focus is no good, can you get more out? So he was constantly getting dirt out of that thing. I'd like to think I helped make it a bit stronger. So yeah, and there is a shot of me with the camera rig right at the end. You might have seen it in the gallery. You just see me standing like, oh, I'm in the shot. So that's what I use. It's kind of like a contraption like that. So some of the shots are a bit wobbly, and like I'm walking down the street with their parade, where they're bringing him back to the thing. I think the real benefit for me was not worrying that I knew it was a cinematic quality camera, and once I sorted that out, I could not have to panic about thinking, oh, am I shooting this in the right format or anything like that. So yeah, so if you can get hold of those cameras, and they're about 1,200 New Zealand dollars for the camera, but that's cheap for cameras, for high-grade cameras anyway, professional. But you do have to have some discipline with that camera. It's not like a point and shoot. You can't just grab footage all over the place. You have to think a little bit, because the batteries don't last that long, and you need to use external sound. You notice they always had a little lapel mic on them. So if you're making films, think about the sound. That's the most important bit, really. I did watch a film here yesterday. I won't say what film it was, but the sound, even though it had lapel mics, it was all back of the room sound, like you're listening to me now, which is fine because you can see me moving and but when you watch it flat on the screen, it can be distracting. So don't worry about the picture, worry about the sound, and you'll be away. It's a very long answer to your question. Yeah, comfortable with your camera, and make sure you've got the sound. Use multiple devices to record the sound if you can. You'll thank yourself for that. And you can sneak them, even your iPhone, just leave it, or your phones, leave them near the person, record the sound from that. And maybe clap or something so you get a spike, so you can align the footage, or you can use software that does it as well.
How did you decide the pace on the film? Because at some points you have music where it would drive it, going up and down, inspirational, and there's parts where you just completely silent and...
Yeah, I don't know. I can't fully remember now. When I watch it back now, I'm sitting there thinking, and it all depends on the audience as well. Sometimes I'm thinking, is this slow or is this quick? And yeah, certainly use music to help make that pace, and inspirational music to lift an audience and things like that. That's great, and then you cut to that. I think there are some points in there where I maybe, if I was going to re-edit it, I would leave a bit longer. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I think if you're doing a short film, you can actually leave a lot more of nothing in there, and allow time for people to think about what you're saying. Whereas with a longer film, especially with that many characters, maybe either drop a character or it's difficult every time you watch it. With an audience, check for fidgets. If you get people fidgeting or whatever, then maybe your pace is too slow or something like that. But check whatever's motivating the audience at the time, I guess. So yeah, hard one, pace.
Did you ever reach a point while editing where you're just like, I just want to get this done?
My wife did. Yeah, it was. So there were 2 blocks of editing, because I had to go back and do other work that we do as the business. So I had a cut-off point. And that was really useful because it gives you that break, and then you can go off and do something else, and then you come back to it. You'll reach a point. There's, you hear about all sorts of cycles, like a grief cycle and a bicycle. I don't know. There are cycles that happen, right? Plan like an article, right? But I believe there's a cycle that happens with a film where they talk about. It's a horrible expression, but they talk about throwing your babies out. So when you filmed it yourself, when you film it, you get all these wonderful shots, and you think, I want that shot and that shot. I'm going to have that, and then you've got somebody saying, no, you don't need that shot, and you're going, but I want that shot, and I'm the director. I'm going to leave that shot in. But as you spend longer and longer with it, you get to the point where you're going, no, that's out, that's out, that's out, and I was cutting it down and down and down in the end, and yeah, that's a good point to get to. There was a really great editor who came here. I don't know if you saw her. She's called Jean Sin. Yeah, Jean Sin. She was trained by the editor Sally Menke, who was the editor for Tarantino's, all of Tarantino's films, from the very first ones right until she died just before the Django film. And her advice is basically, if you're going to film it yourself, get somebody else to edit it, or at least do a rough cut yourself if you filmed it, and then let somebody else edit it, because they'll just, I don't want to use the expression now, but they'll just demise your best bits quite easily to keep the narrative tight and save you guys as an audience from seeing loads of wonderful shots, but they don't mean anything. Yeah.
Very good advice. Now I'll ask a question. Where would you, any tips for interviewing, and where to interview people, or where not to interview them?
So interview somebody, I'll start with the back end. Quiet is good, and 2 cameras, that's good, because people will and and do that sort of stuff. And I don't like I'm watching you guys now, and you're too far away, so if I was filming this, I wouldn't be back here. I would be a lot closer to get, I like seeing eyes during interviews. So keep as close as you can, 2 cameras, and somewhere quiet. There's a standard thing called 3-point lighting, you know about that, which is kind of, you do front light, a little bit side, a bit of a cheek. I can't really do it here because this is all bright. And then you do a backlight and a top light, headlight, or hair light, which doesn't work for me. So yeah, if you can use lights, get some lights, but if you can't use lights, kind of just keep it so it's not full on like a rabbit in headlights, because then it looks like the news. The news cameras, they have a light on the top, and it's like, and then boop, yeah. So just a little bit subtle, and somewhere quiet, and use as many audio recorders as you can. Now, Melita asked the questions for those, but it's a really good point to ask far more questions than you think your story's going to cover, because they will come out with gems in the middle of it. But don't rely on interviews as well. A lot of documentaries, a series of interviews with archive footage. I'm a personal believer that you get in there. I got concrete over the camera because when that concrete was spluttering out, but I think it's more interesting personally. Just if you can capture something happening, do that as well, or at least get somebody else to do it in that format on their phone.
What editing software did you use?
So that was all edited on Adobe Premiere, with which you guys must have, because it's So they've done a great licensing thing now for schools. So you get the suite. So the 3D photograph effects was done in After Effects, and the main editing was in that. There are extra bits of software we use, such as a thing called Pluralize, which is by Red Rocket or Red Cannon or something, and that digitally aligns the various sound sources and picture together, which is not brilliant, but it often works. So yeah, that's what we use.
What was your process for colour grading?
Colour grading, great. Anyone colour graded here? Yep. Have you heard of Film Convert?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my process. So, you know, New Zealand's really great at punching above its weight in terms of doing fantastic bits of things that people don't know about. So, in Wellington, there's a group of guys, a group of people, and they've created a piece of software called Film Convert. And it's one of our great friends in Wellington. He was practically the best man at my wedding, called Lance Lones, and he spent hours and hours and hours scanning in film. So Kodak film, Fuji film, you know, actual film, but just underexposed, so nothing on it, just to get the grain structure. And then he's created some fantastic software that's like a wizard. You know when you've got, on your phone, you've got that little wizard icon and you can click it and the picture goes from naff to, that's interesting. Film Convert does that as well, so it does what's called a base grade first, which puts the blacks where they should be and the whites where they should be. And then it does a colour, a style over the top, and you can choose which style you want.
Does it cost some money? Do you have to buy the software?
As a school, you probably don't. In fact, I know you don't. If you're not producing commercial work, you can download it for free. There's a trial version as well. It's definitely, and I didn't have to buy it because he was my best man. So yeah, it was. But it's used around the world, and it's made by a group of people in Wellington, which is I like it. Yeah. Being called Rubber Monkey. Yeah.